Hey guys, Lord Naren White here, the Holy Ghost, the one true God, back with you with the next video in my Daily Diary series. As usual, before I discuss what I have achieved since yesterday's Daily Diary video, I want to read you a chapter from the Bible. Today it will be the first book of the Chronicles, chapter 10. Now the Philistines fought against Israel, and the men of Israel fled from before the Philistines and fell down slain in Mount Gilboa. And the Philistines followed hard after Saul and after his sons. And the Philistines slew Jonathan and Abinadab and Malchishua, the sons of Saul. And the battle went sore against Saul. And the archers hit him, and he was wounded of the archers. Then said Saul to his armor bearer, Draw thy sword, and thrust me through therewith, lest these uncircumcised come and abuse me. But his armor bearer would not, for he was sore afraid. So Saul took a sword and fell upon it. And when his armor bearer saw that Saul was dead, he likewise fell on the sword and died. So Saul died, and his 3 sons, and all his house together. And when all the men of Israel that were in the valley saw that they fled, and that Saul and his sons were dead, then they forsook their cities and fled, and the Philistines came and dwelt in them. And it came to pass on the morrow, when the Philistines came to strip the slain, that they found Saul and his sons fallen in Mount Gilboa. And when they had stripped him, they took his head and his armor, and sent into the land of the Philistines round about, to carry tidings unto their idols and to the people. And they put his armor in the house of their gods, and fastened his head in the temple of Dagon. And when all Jabesh Gilead heard all that the Philistines had done to Saul, they arose, all the valiant men, and took away the body of Saul, and the bodies of his sons, and brought them to Jabesh, and buried their bones under the oak in Jabesh, and fasted 7 days. So Saul died for his transgression which he committed against the Lord, even against the word of the Lord which he kept not, and also for in asking counsel for one that had a familiar spirit to inquire of it, and inquired not of the Lord. Therefore he slew him, and turned the kingdom unto David the son of Jesse. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Now, there's a lot of nostalgia as we read this chapter here, because not necessarily in a good way, because of course Saul's ultimate death is, the battle going against Saul, Saul committing suicide, and then, of course, the kingdom does go to David, which ends up working out for Israel, David becoming the great king and proving worthy in the eyes of the Lord of being king and being a leader. It's more that not only is it a difficult time, I say nostalgic, however, because I think back to by the time we get to the end of the book of Joshua, right? So we complete Joshua, then the land has rested from war by the time we get to the end of Joshua. And at the end of Joshua is basically like how they're dividing up the land. The specific verse I'm talking about here is Joshua 11, I think it's 11:23 or something. Let's see if I can find it. 11:23 says, and the land rested from the very last verse of chapter 11 of Joshua. And after that, the chapter 12 says how they, not chapter 12, but the rest of Joshua talks about how they divvy up the land, and then the book of Judges starts where judges start coming and judging Israel and leading them, whether it be Othniel, whether it be Gideon, whether it be Samson, whatever it is. There are many Israelite judges. And then, of course, however, by the end of Judges, the land is in a horrific shape, right? So at the end, the very last verse in Judges says, in Judges 21:25, in those days there was no king in Israel. Every man did that which was right in his own eyes. So this meaning, of course, that the people are just like, there's no governmental structure. There's no one there's no one like enforcing law and order, which is going to help the community in general prosper, because you think about like how a community benefits, right? Like, let me just posit an idea for you. A guy wants to open a pizza shop, okay? And so the guy says, no, let me think of something a bit more interesting than pizza. I got a good one. Think about electricity, okay? So the guy's Thomas Edison, of course, the inventor of electricity. He imagine someone is creating electricity or inventing electricity, and so unfortunately there's no government to offer a consequence for theft. So what happens is every time he comes close to inventing electricity, someone comes and burglars his place. There's no consequence, so he never ever ever finishes inventing electricity. So their tribe, which could have had electricity for everybody in the village, never has it, and as a result never modernizes in so many ways that are important. Then you take another group of people that has, law and order in place and someone to enforce said law and order in the form of law enforcement, and they offer a consequence. So if someone's place, unfortunately, if the guy who wants to invent electricity gets burgled in this scenario, then hey, maybe the next time it won't happen because there would be a consequence to the people who robbed the person in the first place. And so that's why I say here that then that whole community would get electricity as a result of this man's ideas coming to fruition. And so unfortunately, in this passage here in Judges, when you see the ideas of, the intellectual capability of human beings not manifesting because of the fact that there's no governmental structure in place to allow people to think and allow people to work in a mental capacity, so everything once again gets reduced to strength of arms and things like that. It's really not going to be a productive society from an intellectual perspective. And I say that because I mentioned nostalgia for a reason, because if you remember, between the book of Joshua, Judges, and Samuel, 1 Samuel, is the book of Ruth. And in the book of Ruth, that's where we learn about the line of David for the first time. And so we learn about the different stories where there's that idea with Boaz and Ruth, right? But and so it's just very very powerful, because that mini chapter of 4 verses is very powerful, because at the end you see that Pharez begat Hezron, Hezron begat Ram, Ram Aminadab, Aminadab Nashon, Nashon Salmon, Salmon Boaz, Boaz Obed, and Obed begat Jesse, and Jesse begat David. And that chapter is so important because it sets the story, and it sets the stage for David, who he is and how great he'll be. Because you see David for the first time in the Bible, and you say, why is this chapter here? You ask yourself, you say, like, coming off the heels of these great men, like, you think about where the Bible is from the time of Genesis. You have the Lord, the creator of heaven and earth. You have the Spirit of God hovering over the face of the earth. You have Adam, the first man, living near 1,000 years. You have all the antediluvian patriarchs. Then after the flood, man's lifespan descends. But still, you have men like Jacob, who will start the 12 tribes of Israel. You have different men like Esau. You have all of the stories that lead up to Levi, Kohath, Amram, Moses. You have the story of the great prophet Moses, who lifted the rod of God, and the Lord parted the Red Sea by way of his prophet. And then you have, after Moses, you have Joshua the son of Nun, who fought to take the land of Canaan alongside the Israelite men in the name of the Lord. And being alongside all these men the whole way, now we see why after Joshua and then Judges, reading the story of Samson fighting, he had occasion against the Philistines. He sought an occasion against them. Gideon, man, the story with Gideon is just so powerful. When the Spirit of God comes upon Gideon after the men encamp outside planning to murder him, the Spirit of God comes upon him. They send messengers, and the men ride out to war and defeat the adversary. And then also the story with Othniel, all these great men. And then we get this 4 chapters all of a sudden. You say, what is the first time you read it? You say, what is the point of the book of Ruth after all of this? And there's a name, one name at the end of this. I think it may be the only time the name David is even mentioned in the book of Ruth. But there it is. The last verse, the last word and the last verse of the last chapter of the book of Ruth is the point of the book of Ruth. It is to tell the story of what happens to lead up to the great King David's birth. And that's why when we get to this point in the Bible, when we read that verse here in 1 Chronicles 10:14, and inquired not of the Lord, therefore he slew him and turned the kingdom unto David the son of Jesse. It's so powerful, because I think back nostalgically of to the book of Ruth, where after all these great men, you ask, what is the point of this book chapter? And the point is that David will come, and David will be ultimately, arguably, the greatest king in the history of Judaism. So, very, very powerful stuff there. And so with that, I'll go ahead and end the Bible reading there for today and transition over to what I have achieved since yesterday's Daily Dive video. Since yesterday's Daily Dive video, I worked my software developer job. I worked at my core. I uploaded and scheduled the Daily Dive video for 2/7/23, and I created, uploaded, and scheduled this Daily Dive video for 2/8/23. And with no further achievements since yesterday's Daily Dive video, I want to say thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. Please like, comment, and subscribe, as it greatly helps the channel. Light to be with you all. Take care, and thanks again.